right now, without thinking about it. You reach for something with one specific hand, you picked up your phone with it, you signed your name with it. You've done this 10,000 times today and never once questioned it. But the real explanation goes back further than you think. About 90% of people on this planet favor the right hand, not 60%, not a slight lean. 90% in every culture, on every continent, going back as far as anyone has looked. That number should stock you, because nothing else in biology behaves like this. Flip a coin on handedness in any other species, and you get something close to 50-50. So why does your species break the pattern so completely? For decades, scientists had no clean answer. Some blamed the way we learned to write, some blamed a single stray gene, some blamed the ancient tools our ancestors picked up. None of it held together. Chimpanzees use tools too, and they split their hand preference almost evenly. Parrots show a favored foot for holding food, and even that splits close to 50-50 across the population. Kangaroos, it turns out, lean left as a group, which is its own small mystery for another day. But nothing in the animal kingdom matches the near total agreement your species shows. Something else was going on. Something buried deeper in your evolutionary history than tool use or handwriting or culture. Left-handed children used to be forced to switch hands in classrooms well into the 20th century, as if handedness were a bad habit rather than a biological signature. Teachers tied children's left hands behind their backs. Parents scolded them at the dinner table. All that effort assumed handedness was a choice you could correct with enough discipline. It never really worked. Forced right-handed writing didn't erase the underlying preference. It just layered an awkward performance on top of it. That alone should have been a clue that something deeper than habit was steering the hand. In 2026, the team led by Dr. Thomas Puschel and Rachel Horwitz at the University of Oxford, working with Professor Chris Venditti at the University of Reading, decided to stop guessing one theory at a time. Instead, they built a single model and threw every competing idea into it at once. Diet, habitat, body size, social structure, tool use, brain size, the way each species moves. They gathered data on over 2,000 individual monkeys and apes across 41 species and ran it all through the same statistical framework. If handedness had one true cause, this method would find it. At first, humans made no sense at all. Every other primate fit somewhere on a predictable curve. Your species sat completely outside it, an outlier so extreme the model couldn't explain you with any single factor. That's unsettling for a scientist. It usually means you're missing a variable, so the team added two more: brain size, and the ratio between your arm length and your leg length, which is really just a technical way of measuring how committed a species is to walking upright. The moment those two factors went into the model, something remarkable happened. You stopped being an anomaly. Your extreme right-hand bias suddenly fit the pattern like it had been there all along. Here's what that means. You are right-handed, more likely than not, because your ancestors stood up. Think about what that actually required. For millions of years, your ancestors moved through trees and across open ground on four limbs, and every one of those limbs was doing double duty as a tool for locomotion. Then, roughly 6 or 7 million years ago, something changed. Certain hominins began walking upright, freeing the front limbs from the work of carrying the body. Suddenly your hands weren't just for moving anymore. They were free to specialize, and specialization, once it starts, tends to snowball. A hand that's good at throwing gets used for throwing more often. A hand that's precise with a stone tool gets favored for the next tool and the next. Over enough generations, a mild lean in one direction hardens into a habit written into the body itself. That's stage one. Walking upright didn't create handedness out of nothing. It created the opportunity for handedness to exist at all. But upright walking alone doesn't explain why 90% of humans lean the same direction. Other bipedal creatures don't show this. That's where the second piece comes in, and it's the one that should really give you pause. As the hominin brain grew larger and more complex, something structural was happening inside it. The two hemispheres of your brain started dividing labor more sharply. Language settled mostly into one side. Fine motor planning followed a similar pattern, and as that specialization deepened, it dragged your hand preference along with it, locking in the direction rather than just the tendency. Bigger brains didn't just make our ancestors smarter, they made our ancestors more asymmetric. Using this two-part model, the researchers could estimate headedness scores for extinct hominins who left no written record of which hand they favored, and the numbers form a line you can almost watch climbing across millions of years. Early hominins like Ardipithecus, barely upright, show only a mild rightward tilt, not far from what you'd see in a modern chimpanzee. Australopithecus, a little more committed to walking, shows a bit more lean. Homo ergaster and Homo erectus, taller, more efficient walkers with noticeably larger brains, climb higher still. Neanderthals, your close and large-brained cousins, sit close to the modern human number. And Homo sapiens, at the top of that climb, landed the strongest, most consistent rightward bias of any species the researchers tested. There's one exception, and it proves the rule in the strangest way. Homo floresiensis, the tiny hominin nicknamed the Hobbit, found on the Indonesian island of Flores, had a small brain and a body that still carried features built for climbing, not full commitment to upright walking. Its feet were long. Its toes curved, the kind of anatomy you'd expect in something that still spent real time in the branches. Feed that combination into the model, and the prediction comes out weak. A small brain, an incomplete break from the trees. And, the model says, a hand preference that never hardened the way yours did. It's as if you can watch the entire evolutionary formula fail on exactly the species missing both of its ingredients. Notice what this timeline is really telling you. It isn't a single dramatic mutation that flipped a switch and made humanity right-handed overnight. It's a slow ratchet, tightening generation after generation, tied to two separate biological transformations arriving in sequence rather than at once. First the legs changed. Then, much later, the brain caught up and locked the pattern in. Two unrelated evolutionary pressures, arriving millions of years apart, somehow compounding into the single most consistent behavioral trait your species has ever produced. Neither pressure was aimed at your hands specifically. Your hands just happened to be standing in the path of both of them. So here is the strange part you carry with you every single day. Every time you pick up a pen or a phone or a cup of coffee with the same hand without thinking, you're running a script written by two of the biggest transformations in your evolutionary history. One event freed your hands from the ground millions of years ago. Another rewired your brain into two increasingly specialized halves. Neither of those things happened so you could someday sign a form or swipe a screen. But both left a mark so deep that it still decides which hand you reach with, every time without your permission. Does that mean your left-handed friends are somehow evolutionarily behind? Not at all. About 1 in 10 people still lean left, and that number has stayed remarkably stable across cultures and centuries. Nobody fully knows why that minority persists, and the researchers are the first to admit it. Some suspect a genetic trade-off, where left-handedness comes bundled with other traits that get preserved even as the majority pattern intensifies. Others point to advantages that show up specifically because left-handers are rare and edge in certain sports or specific tasks where opponents aren't used to facing them. The honest answer, for now, is that science can explain why most of us turned right far better than it can explain why a few of us did it. What this research really hands you is a small piece of your own deep history, sitting in your palm every time you use it. Your right hand isn't just a habit you picked up as a toddler, imitating your parents. It's a fossil you carry on the end of your arm, shaped by an ancestor who first stood upright on the African savanna and reinforced generation after generation by a brain that kept growing more divided, more specialized, more efficient at doing one thing consistently well. Think about how many separate parts of your daily life this single trait quietly organizes. The side of the table where your fork sits. The way scissors, can openers, and even some school desks are manufactured, almost always for the majority. The awkward fumble a left-handed person feels reaching for a spiral notebook or a coffee mug with the handle turned the wrong way. None of that is cultural accidents stacked on top of nothing. It's an entire built environment, quietly shaped around a bias that was already ancient before the first tool was ever manufactured for sale. You didn't design the world around your dominant hand. Your dominant hand designed the world, generation after generation, without either of you noticing. And this is where the deeper twist sits. You tend to think of your body as something you're fully in control of, moment to moment, choice by choice. But handedness is one of the clearest reminders that a good portion of what feels like personal preference was actually settled millions of years before you were born by ancestors who never held a pen, never used a phone, and never had any reason to care which hand you'd eventually favor. They weren't optimizing for you. They were optimizing for survival on two legs with a growing brain, and your habit of reaching right is simply the leftover architecture of that unrelated project. There's something quietly humbling in that. You spend your life thinking of your habits as personal choices, what you write with, what you throw with, which hand you instinctively offer first. But some of the most automatic things you do were never really decided by you at all. They were decided by a creature you never met, who stood up on two legs millions of years before your species had a name, and by a brain that kept reorganizing itself long after that ancestor was gone. So the next time you catch yourself reaching for something without a second thought, notice which hand moves first. That small automatic motion isn't random. It's the last visible link in a chain that stretches back through Homo erectus, through Australopithecus, all the way to the first hominin who took a step without putting a hand down to steady itself. You've done this 10,000 times today. But now you know it goes back further than you think.